Whenever a new Marvel movie or show gets released nowadays, I always find myself praying to Odin, Ego, Khonshu, and any other all-powerful entities that this'll be one of the good ones. Marvel Zombies was no exception. While it did have an incredible trailer and a lot of potential, Marvel's previous attempts at this premise in What If had been iffy, to say the least. I went into Marvel Zombies really hoping that a lot of the problems I had with What If had been resolved, and yeah, in a lot of ways they were. But for every problem that this show fixes from What If, a new one takes its place, and Marvel can't exactly rely on the proof of concept defense this time around, now can they?
It's weird, but you'll get used to it.
Maybe.
Some people get used to it.
To start out with the most immediate problem I had, the first episode really sucks. It takes place 5 years after the events of What If Zombies and features Kate Bishop, Ms. Marvel, and Ironheart making their way across the zombie-infested United States on a quest to bring the world back to normal. Now, I'm not at all in the camp of hating these three like some people are. I like these actresses, these characters, and the other Marvel projects they've been in, and I can even see the logic in Marvel teaming them up together. In a world where the majority of Avengers are undead monsters and the world they protected is ruined, it makes sense to focus on the younger generations of characters who were inspired by them. It would make even more sense, however, if that was explored or acknowledged in any way. There are no scenes of these characters reflecting on how things used to be or having to reconcile with how much things have changed. Instead, it's the same jokey tone that was a major problem in What If Zombies.
Oh, awesome! I got a trick arrow!
There is at least a bit more of an excuse this time with the fact that 5 years have passed and so they're just used to it, but it still doesn't sell the harshness of this world and the connection between these characters since they spend most of their time just cracking jokes. Quipping is not the same thing as chemistry. You actually have to give these characters traits that compare and contrast with each other.
I spy something green. I swear, if it is another tree.
The episode eventually moves on to focusing on Kamala and Blade in his first non-post-credit or Wesley Snipes appearance, and the supporting cast of Black Widow. But this team-up doesn't end up being any more interesting. All we get out of it is a few minutes of exposition, with the only piece of drama being a very quick moment with Black Widow's mother and an equally quick reaction from everyone else. There's some decent action throughout the episode, but only a couple of particularly standout moments. The rest is pretty standard zombie fare, which I suppose is to be expected when a lot of the good ideas were used up on a proof of concept episode in another TV show. And just as a whole, the episode has its fair share of storytelling problems, like how Kate, Kamala, and Riri all know each other since they're from New York, Jersey City, and Chicago respectively, or how Kamala got her bangles in this continuity. It was my understanding that the US Postal Service was unreliable at the best of times, let alone during a zombie apocalypse. And the fact that the device that sets this entire plot in motion literally just falls out of the sky for the characters to stumble upon.
A last-ditch effort to save the planet from the zombie plague.
Oh, and also the show's title card sucks. I know that's a nitpick, but you've got a much better logo right here. Use it. It was at this point that I was more than a little concerned. If you see my last video, you'll know that I was singing the praises for the trailer for this show. And so the fact that I just straight up didn't like the first episode was not a good sign. But then something happened. Upon starting episode 2, I was surprised to see that the opening scene was genuinely great. The episode starts with Shang-Chi and Katie during the initial outbreak. We see the two of them running through San Francisco in this cool tracking shot complete with giant zombies and other creatures, Shang-Chi beating up zombies with his martial arts, Wen-Wu showing up in an attack helicopter and using his 10 rings to protect his son, and Jimmy Woo is also there. I love that guy.
Thanks, I'm also a youth pastor.
This is much better adherence to MCU continuity than what we saw in the first episode, tying the initial outbreak spun off from Ant-Man and the Wasp together with Shang-Chi, which both took place in San Francisco. And more importantly, it's a much better example of the Marvel Universe depicting a zombie apocalypse in ways that no other franchise could. Even the comedy in the show starts to be better allocated, with a more lighthearted scene following on from this moment after a 5-year time jump.
Coming up next, it's Lights by Journey, performed by the one, the only Sean and Katie.
It's a tonal shift that acknowledges that this ordeal is traumatic for these characters, but they've had time to get used to it, and they were already friends, so at least they have each other. And from then on, the show sees some significant improvement. There's a much better use of elements and characters from the MCU. The zombies throughout the show are depicted as being a little more organized than what we'd seen from them before, and the explanation for why is actually pretty clever. Scarlet Witch, who was infected in What If, was able to regain some of her cognitive ability due to her mind powers, but still retains the virus's need to spread, essentially turning her into a magic warlord and leading a superpowered undead army throughout the world. Zombie Scarlet Witch was reasonably scary in What If, and it's something that gets built on reasonably well in this show, now that she has the intelligence to back it up. The characters in general have a lot more chemistry with each other now that they're paired up in ways that allow them to bounce off each other reasonably well, including a couple scenes between Yelena and Red Guardian that actually left me thinking.
Okay, that was really good.
It's generally pretty good stuff, to the point where, despite the concerns I had from What If, and especially that first episode, I can still recommend this show. But that doesn't mean that those problems don't come back to rear their ugly head, because there's kind of a major problem that's present all throughout the show. But simply, the plot just isn't that good. I've already mentioned that the catalyst for the show involves Ms. Marvel just so happening to stumble across the one thing that will save the world, but let's actually talk about that. The thing she finds is a beacon from S.H.I.E.L.D. meant to summon the Nova Corps to save Earth. The characters then spend the first 3 episodes traveling to New Asgard to find a spaceship where they can send the beacon for help. I'll just ignore the fact that despite the Asgardians living in isolation and mass communication presumably not being a thing anymore, the characters somehow know that New Asgard exists. Oh dear, that's not me ignoring it, is it? And then the 3rd episode ends with the characters successfully sending the beacon, only to immediately be told by the Nova Corps to fuck off.
Return to the surface or be destroyed. You have 10 seconds to comply.
At that point, the final episode revolves around some shit to do with the Hulk and the Infinity Stones. I don't know. It's not explained very well, and it's a little hard to follow when the goal up until that point was something completely different. And on a slightly related note, yeah, the Hulk has the power of the Infinity Stones now. If you thought that zombie Thanos was going to play a major role in the show like What If implied he would, no, Marvel went for the head pretty quickly on that one. And there are other problems with the show in terms of character writing. There are some story arcs involving Thor going into depression after failing to defeat Thanos, and Zemo from Civil War offering a safe haven and using superheroes as cannon fodder.
Don't worry, you'll be remembered as heroes. That's the important part, yes?
They're interesting ideas, but not a lot is really done with them. And while the show does have some decent dramatic moments between the characters, there isn't much in the way of character arcs or lessons that they have to learn that affect the course of the story, which make the action scenes just serve as spectacle and nothing more. While I'm on the topic of my silly little grievances for this show, which I'll remind you I was genuinely excited for, there's one little tiny, insignificant, almost show-ruining problem that I have to bring up. That being that the ending, simply put, is not an ending. I won't go into spoilers, but suffice it to say, there's no resolution, nothing has been accomplished, the world is more or less in the exact same state we left it in at the end of What If, when Spider-Man said,
"We're gonna save the world."
I was a little confused, to put it lightly. This show was marketed as a mini-series in a self-contained pocket of the MCU. It was reasonable to assume it wasn't going to end on a cliffhanger. So I felt compelled to do a little digging online and found an article from comicbook.com, where Marvel executive Brad Winderbaum was quoted as saying, "People have got to subscribe to Disney Plus and watch this show. If that happens, they will get more." So there's a 2nd season that Marvel are trying, and I'll say that again, trying to get greenlit, but as of right now, it's unconfirmed. Okay, great, splendid, lovely, neato burrito. Don't end it on a cliffhanger then. This doesn't outright ruin the show for me because I still enjoyed my time with it, and it's not like I was that invested in the plot to begin with, but it did leave a bad taste in my mouth while looking back on the show overall. If you saw my last video on What If Zombies, you might remember me saying this. If Marvel Zombies is as good as it looks like it's going to be, there is likely going to be very little reason to rewatch What If Zombies ever again. Now that I've actually seen Marvel Zombies though, between the two, I'm gonna be honest, I'd recommend What If. As much as I've criticized that episode, it at least managed to stick to a consistently decent level of quality throughout. And while the story still has no absolute conclusion, it at least ended on a more hopeful note with a sense that progress had been made. Marvel Zombies has higher highs, but also much lower lows, and is also currently, possibly permanently, rather pointless. Entertaining in its pointlessness, but still pointless nonetheless. And even if that second season does come out, I don't know how much enthusiasm I can muster at this point. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters Heather Reed, Zelda, Moon Goddesses, The Hen Rolled, Seth M, Chris Spicer, Jacob K, Wasp Sen, Andrew Taylor, and Deceiver of Gods. Thank you so much for the support. If you'd like to see your name in the credits, along with early access to scripts and videos, as well as exclusive unused video thumbnails, or if you'd just like to chat with me, consider supporting me on Patreon for just $1.50 a month. The link is in the description.